rent movies or buy.
Sure.
How are we breaking out of the constraints of those types of approaches?
So I'll start with, I think AVOD content has been a big theme to start this year with Sell Pluto and a lot of other conversations around TV.
Huge.
So Hulu benefited from having a lot of free content when they launched their SVOD service in Hulu Plus. All of our models with our SVOD properties also have a very significant AVOD tier to it. It's critical. It's very hard to ask people just to come to your service and put a credit card in. Crunchyroll, for instance, 80% of the content available is available for free with ads. So that's our AVOD model. That model brings them in, let them start watching the content, let them enjoy that content, and then ask them to put in their credit card and pay you. It's a bit rude to say, hey, just give me your money without knowing what you're paying for. And it's hard from a marketing perspective. So we have the AVOD model. The SVOD model, Crunchyroll's announced we're at 2 million paying subs. Verve's been doing very well, as has Rooster Teeth. But both of those, Rooster Teeth, Verve, Crunchyroll, we all now are experimenting with other models. Crunchyroll launched 3 mobile games last year. We launched our own con that had 45,000 people attend it. We have a robust merch business that we're leaning into further. And now, for the first time ever, we're thinking about how do we distribute Crunchyroll outside of our own app. And there's a plethora of new channel destinations that you can go to. And we believe now is the time to be able to do that because we fortified our owned offering through all those 360 experiences that now allows us to take our offering, put it out there, and grow the larger audience. So I think...
What did you have in mind when you said? I mean, you've heard Eric talk about a huge variety. What did you have in mind?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, David.
Oh, so I'm just looking at the name of the panel is the future of the television business. And when I think of the television business, I think of long-form programming, expensive programming, and the AVOD. There's a big conundrum in the AVOD model, and that is like somewhere the content in its original creation has to be created. So Netflix works because Netflix lays out, I think it's $12 billion or will be $12 billion to create original content.
Every time I hear that number, it goes up a bit.
Yeah. and Viacom just bought Pluto, which was the largest probably of the AVOD services. But when you look what's on there, it's not funding that content. Crunchyroll is awesome. I wish I owned Crunchyroll. It's a bit of a unicorn in that it gets the benefit of getting a huge amount of content from other markets so that it feeds into this ecosystem. So the question is, for me is when is the AVOD system going to be able to actually fund the creation of television-sized content? And right now that doesn't exist, and we're all waiting, I guess, for the broadcast industry money to sort of flow into what is now a very fragmented AVOD system and allow players to create expensive content the way that broadcast networks, are able to do today, but probably unlikely to do in large numbers tomorrow. And I think where that goes, if I had to guess, is that these big players, the Disney Pluses or the Disney Foxes and the AT&Ts and so on, will have a offering like Hulu that combines free and pay. And by leveraging or amortizing the cost across all of it and windowing some between free and pay. And I think in a weird way, the show You, which started off as a Lifetime show, was a failure, became a big hit on Netflix. I just love that story because it just shows you how in the pay world and in this huge library and this algorithm-driven world, you can literally find success, and then you can watch that success forever, not just on the week that it's been broadcast. So I think the combination will restore AVOD, but there's going to be a gap, or there is a gap today. I think that gap's going to go on for a while.
Yeah. So I'm just going to, I'm going to turn to both you and Gayle just a second. I'm going to ask a quick fire question at the end. I'm horrified at how quickly this session has gone. 20 seconds, so you can be thinking about this. How does the conversation change the content? Just be thinking about that. Gayle, quick comment on business models.
Well, the business model that we're following is very similar to what Eric was just talking about. We've created a series that's popular, has a huge fan base, and we're now taking that piece of IP and we're building out, the 360 kind of model. So we've gone from, short form video series. Then we've gone to podcast. We've launched a merch line. We are looking at doing a live show. I call it event. And then also, a long form, more traditional half-hour series that could go to, upstream to streaming or broadcast, depending on how, the buyers. So it's really that ability to be able to monetize in a number of different places where you can kind of find your fans and they can connect with you.
Yeah. Benoit, one of the biggest challenges of the small screen is keeping people there, right? People believe they're only watching short form. I actually see data that says that that's not entirely true, but how do you approach that? How do you keep people there?
I mean, yeah, and that could be also answering the question around the business model, because everything that I hear right now, it's like still very much what we are doing today. But let's think about what's in like 5-10 years from now. And going back to that example of Fortnite, when you're dealing with 8 to 12 years old that never heard of what a cable box was, never turned on the big screen to tune in to a channel. And I've been growing up using virtual currency, buying virtual goods while being entertained. That is, for me, what the future of monetization and what the future business model is for entertainment, even on the bigger screen. And that's things that we are experimenting with, but obviously a lot are in the gaming space I've been working with when it comes to building a lot of different soft and hard currency and crazy virtual goods, like what Fortnite is doing with their skins. And why, like, think about what Netflix did with their Choose Your Own Adventure.
Bandersnatch.
Yeah, Bandersnatch. Like, think about where it could go, right? You could really start thinking much broader and crazier storyline that you could basically build yourself and now start interacting with that with virtual good and virtual currency. So that's where I think it's going, and it's probably not tomorrow, but think 10 years from now, that's definitely where that's going to be. Now to how to retain users on mobile screen, actually, virtual currency and virtual goods are a great way to retain users. You create behaviors beyond the monetization, just the behaviors that you create by earning virtual currency that you can then spend to have a better entertaining experience is a very interesting thing to do. But also, I think we've seen up until now, like on the Hulu and Netflix, this concept of binging. And I think we may go back to something different where scheduling and cadence of release is very important to get users to come back the next day to watch the next episode. And that emotion of anticipation about what the next episode is all about is critical and creates some amazing retention. And when it comes to mobile, that's a critical piece.
So I'd love to hear, as you look forward this year, where do you see the big opportunities, each of you? Real quick, keep it short, but where do you see the opportunities emerging this year? We mentioned Bandersnatch from Netflix. Are we going to see an upsurge in interactive content or something else? Who'd like to go first? Eric.
Bundling. I think you have the larger services that are getting put together. They have really robust offerings. You have the smaller ones that each have their own passionate audiences. And I think we're going to see a lot more of those smaller folks working together and creating unique partnerships that provide value tied to cost back to consumers. It's going to have to happen this year.
Gayle?
Yeah, I think that we're going to find this year. One of the interesting things is the distribution, right? So I think people in my space, which are seeing lots of opportunities for distribution with OTT, which are newer to us, whether those work or not and how much money you can make when there's so many services will really be, a question of who stays and who goes. It's kind of ironic that we're on a panel called The Future of Television, and none of us work in television, nor really have we even spoken about television since we've been up here, which kind of says a lot. But I think that, as we see that continual shift from, the viewers moving away from television and into more other services where they can be entertained. But it's also the growth. Because what Benoit's talking about, like gaming, does that compete with people who are creating television? In the under 18s and the Gen Z? Absolutely. Because it's new forms of entertainment competing for their attention. So there's multiple levels of things that are, kind of disrupting that traditional ecosystem. And they're not just taking a series from one place and putting it on another place. It's much more complex than that, really.
David, what do you think? Opportunities for this.
First, I'm not convinced that the Bandersnatch or interactive storytelling is close to being successful yet. But what I think is the most interesting opportunity right in front of us is the kind of IP-ization, and that's not really a word, but of content, where watching long form or big television or whatever you want to call it, large entertainment, feels very much like searching the internet, where it used to be captive of your cable system. So that means anything interesting can bubble to the top. Anything can become a hit on Netflix or these other systems coming on a truly meritocratic way. And it's a very different world when things have become popular or interesting on television. You come to them the same way that you come to them on the internet. And if any of you have YouTube TV or played with YouTube TV and then played on YouTube, just that combination is phenomenal. It's a much, much more interesting experience than cable.
Yeah. Benoit, thoughts?
I think for me, the big opportunity, and it's pretty selfish, but looking at what Netflix is doing with pushing a ton of content, but also thinking about how they can engage on the phone through original short form to lead into original long form is a huge opportunity for us, but also a huge opportunity for the industry. Instead of just working with a teaser, now you really start writing an original episode, short form, to push into a longer format in the bigger screen.
I don't think that's self-serving at all. Okay, so let's do our closing question. Please keep your remarks to 20 seconds or less, otherwise the big hook will come out. So how does the conversation change the content? And since, Gayle, you were the one that said that wonderful phrase, why don't you go first?
Has the conversation...
How does the conversation change, conversation between the stars and the audience?
The relationship.
How does it change the content?
Oh, well, I think that actually our fans are part of our content creation. So I think that that's an enormous change that people on an earlier panel spoke about, but it's the ability to let your fans not just be fans from a distance, but to be contributors. In one of our short-form stories that I was mentioning, the ghost stories, the fans started sending us their ghost stories. And so we'll get hundreds of submissions every week. And then we decided, this is awesome. So we decided we had to reward the fans and include them. And we now use the stories they send to create our content and in our shows.
Wow.
And we read them. So I think that relationship between fan and content creator is not just at a distance now, somebody who you can look up to, but somebody who you can be part of. And it's the same thing we see in gaming. You can play games with your fans, with your, the people who you think are your celebrities. You can engage with them.
Eric.
Similar thing.
I don't think it's just about the paycheck. I think they care just as much about how large of an audience they can get, other unique ways that they can monetize themselves, explore, participate in making content, being a part of games, or being at that live event. So I think with creators or talent themselves, they really care about their entire day is based upon their community and their following. And they really, really care about expanding the ability to do so in addition to that paycheck.
David?
I was thinking about the NBA. I'm a basketball fan, and just thinking how the entire gatekeeping system between a league and the players and the fans is broken down, and now people follow players just as much as they follow teams. And I think that's actually a pretty interesting signal. And I'm thinking of big talent now. What is happening in the ecosystem, which is all these gatekeepers, suits, as I've been myself referred to, that used to sit in big offices and create gates and little pathways and then try to monetize all that by hanging on to it, are kind of breaking down. And so if you're, when I'm talking to A-level talent, there's a side of their brain that says, I just want to get right in front of my fans and connect directly. And there's another side that's saying, but I want $5 million. And they're trying to figure out how they get there. And they're going to get there. So I think it's an interesting time.
Benoit, last word.
I think the brands and the town realize that it's all